Hello, welcome to Revive and Rise. I'm your host, Melody Parrish, and I want to thank you so much for joining us today. So today I'm going to continue with sharing stories from my brother and lessons that I've learned from him. And today I want to talk about how things that you think are going to be so difficult may actually be easy. And when I say easy, I mean easier than you thought. So when you think something's difficult, sometimes, we try and avoid it, but we end up doing it anyway. And then we're in the mindset that it is difficult, so that we make things difficult and even more difficult sometimes. But things that we think are going to be difficult are not always difficult. Sometimes they can be easier than you think. You just have to take that first step. And I want to thank you beforehand. I want to thank you for your patience with me. As I've been sharing these stories, you've been very patient, as sometimes I sniffle, sometimes I get very emotional, sometimes I have to pause. And I want to thank you. And I'm doing that just so you know that grief is real and there's no time limit. I'm doing that so that you can understand sometimes different things trigger grief. It's okay to be happy and to have happy moments when you're grieving. But sometimes in those happy moments, one thing just triggers the grief and the memories. And then we have to pause. So I want to thank you for having patience with me, and I hope that I'm able to convey that to people. Now, talking about difficult things and how we think about things as difficult, sometimes we get ourselves psyched up, and sometimes we get ourselves all worked up thinking, oh, this is going to be so difficult to do. I don't even know if I can do it. I don't even know if I feel up to it today. Maybe I just won't even try. Maybe I won't even do it because I just can't. And we go down the rabbit hole of thinking of everything that's negative that could result from the difficult tasks that we're about to do. We just go down that rabbit hole and we're like, well, this can happen, this can happen, this can happen, this can happen. And before long, we talk ourselves out of it. And we just avoid the whole situation. And then that can have its own consequences. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. Everything just depends. And when I'm talking about these things, there are times when things are difficult and those negative things do happen. But there's also times when things are difficult and good things happen instead. We have to, as human beings, we have to have the discernment to understand which is which. And to prepare ourselves for which is which. And when I'm talking about these difficulties, and I'm talking about my brother, there were times my brother never did get his driver's license. He would talk about it, and he would want to, but we both knew that he couldn't. He was scared of getting into cars. He was scared of riding in cars. There was a time when he would not ride in a car. He would not go anywhere because he was too scared. The fear was too great. And I tried to explain to him, that fear would interact with him driving and his decision making while he drove. So it wouldn't be a good idea for him to try. And he understood, but that desire was still there. At any rate, because of that, whenever we would travel, he would travel one of two ways. He would travel with someone else driving, or he would travel on the local bus. Those were the two ways that he would travel through life, which meant that if we were going to go anywhere, I was going to be the driver. So on holidays, or when we wanted to go for a visit with my parents, I would be the driver. And in a future episode, I will talk more about my brother getting married. But he did. He did get married to a wonderful woman that was the perfect woman for him. So now when we went together, it would be both of them in the back seat of the car. And whenever it would be a holiday, or I was going, we were going to our parents' house to spend time with them, I would always think, because I had to plan for this event, this road trip, and I would always, for the first bit of time that we did this, I would always think that it was going to be difficult. I would always think that it was going to be negative, and that the time would be difficult, that there was going to be so many hurdles to have to go through. And I would always think, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know, I've been working hard. I've been working a lot. Most people that know me know that for the majority of my working career, I have had 2 jobs, and that made things a little more difficult, trying to figure out the right space and the right time and how to go about doing this. And I would be tired. I would already be tired. And this was just going to make me more tired. We'd have to have bathroom stops. I was sure of that. And when would that have to happen? And what would go on with that? Because you can't stop yourself from going to the bathroom. And what if you have to go to the bathroom, but there's no gas station around? I lived in a small town. There were a lot of country roads and places where there weren't gas stations around. So what if I'm just told, oh, I've got to go to the bathroom now, and there's no gas station. What am I going to do? How frustrating is that going to be? How difficult is that going to be? What is that going to look like? Da, 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 da. So I went down the rabbit hole there. And then what happens if, I came up with all these different scenarios, all these different things, all these different struggles that were going to happen. And then sometimes I would say, I just can't do this. I can't do this. Let's do tomorrow, or let's do next week, or I would say something like that. So I would always plan ahead, and I'd start the idea of going maybe a week before. So I'd start to plan, and I'd start to psych myself up, and I would start, because I knew that I would avoid that road trip a couple times before we'd actually go. I'd talk myself out of it, because again, I didn't think I was good enough to handle it at first. I didn't think that I was strong enough to handle things. I didn't think that I would know what to do. Basically, it all came down with my lack of self-confidence in myself about handling situations at first. So I would instantly think of how difficult it was going to be. I would instantly think of the problems. And then I would think, well, I won't have a solution to that problem. And that'll frustrate me, and that'll aggravate me, so I'm just not going to do it. But then would come the time when I would have to do it. Most of the time I would have to do it to make sure to get to my parents' house before Christmas Eve, to make sure to get to my parents' house before one of our birthdays, make sure to get to my parents' house because I told them that we would visit this weekend, or, something like that. But for some reason, it would need to be done. There was no more putting it off. And so I would go and pick them up, and we would get their luggage and their suitcases or their duffel bags that would last for the weekend or for a few days or however long this trip was going to last. And we'd get them in the car, settled, and then off we go. I would turn on the radio. I would try and talk to them, chat a little bit, and then would come the bathroom, or the I'm hungry, I need a snack, or, those kinds of things. So I'd need to stop. I'd have to find a gas station and pull over and stop. Then I would get back on the road, and then I'd realize, eventually I didn't have gas, so I'd stop again. And what would normally be like a 3.5, 4 hour trip would turn into a lot longer. And then by the end of it all, we would be so frustrated and so annoyed with ourselves and with each other. And that was the first couple times. And then the next time I would be like, look at my track record. This is going to be difficult. This is going to be, what's going to happen next. This is going to be difficult. And, it would be maybe they haven't packed. They didn't think about packing. So we're going to end up leaving an hour later or something like that. And I don't know why, but I've always been a stickler for time. So that was always important. And the difficulties would continue, but eventually I learned. Eventually, the next time that we were going to have a road trip, I would say to myself, okay, these are the difficulties we had on this last road trip. What can I do differently? So I would try something else. It would either work or it wouldn't. And then I would try something else. If that didn't work, the next time I would try something else. And it began to get easier and easier for this road trip. And as it began to get easier, it was more enjoyable. It was more enjoyable because I wasn't constantly looking at the negative and constantly thinking about the negative. We were able to enjoy each other with the time that we had on the road trip. And what I discovered and what I learned, probably after, I would say the first 10 times, then I had it down. And I knew what I needed to do. I knew how the road trip was going to go. I knew how to make this easy and how to make this successful. I had learned that we needed to start talking about them getting packed and ready to go at least a few days in advance. And that I needed to have something like a reward. Like if we can leave on time, then we'll be able to stop and get something to eat, or then we'll be able to do this and have some kind of reward system in place. Maybe we could go and do another activity, or we could stop and do something. But there always needed to be a reward system for if we were going to leave early or on time. The next thing that I realized is that I needed to get them comfortable. I needed to get them comfortable if the road trip was going to go easy and the road trip was going to be relaxed, and we'd be able to be relaxed with each other and enjoy each other's company in the time that we had. It was about 3.5, 4 hours road trip. So in that time that we were together, I wanted us to enjoy each other as much as possible, instead of the frustration and the annoyance and everything. So I learned that I needed to get the snack and the drinks beforehand. And I realized I could make a lot of these problems go away all in one trip. I realized that if I went to the gas station before we got on the interstate to go, I could get the drinks, I could get the snacks, everybody could go to the bathroom, and I could fill up on gas. And that made things a lot easier. Everybody was happy. And it got to the point where I would tell them, I would be like, if we can leave on time, then we can go by McDonald's or Burger King or somewhere and get a meal. Get you a hamburger and fries and a drink. Not just a snack, but a meal. And, just that simple thing would make them so excited that they would decide, oh, well, okay, then I'm going to make sure to get packed and we can leave on time. We can stop by and get us a meal and everything will be okay. And I understood the more that we did this, because what would end up happening is that they would get full, and then we'd all chat a little bit, talk a little bit, and then they would go to sleep. And we'd wake up and they'd wake up when we got to my parents' house. And everybody would be happy. We would be on time. Everybody would be happy. We would start things off right. But I was in control of that. I had to look at a difficult situation, or what I considered a difficult situation. I had to look at that, and I had to learn from the things that I didn't do that I could have done differently. I had to learn and to try other things and to make small adjustments until what I saw as being difficult, what I saw as being such a problem, ended up being one of the easiest things that I did. Once I learned the routine, once I learned how to prevent problems, once I learned how to prevent those difficulties from slipping in, it became one of the easiest things and one of the most joyful things that I did. Because those moments were filled with chatting. Those moments were filled with times and precious conversations that we would have. Those times were filled with moments that we were never going to get back. So we needed to take advantage of those moments. Those times were filled with us singing songs with the radio against playing music on the air keyboard or the air guitar. Those moments were filled with laughter, and they were filled with rest. And that taught me a very valuable lesson. What I saw as something difficult, what I saw as something that could end up negatively. And I was also concerned about the panic and the physical symptoms and all of the other things that could happen. Sometimes they did, but most of the time they didn't. And when they did, I would know what to do. But that's the thing. I learned that when something looks difficult, sometimes it is. And sometimes the impact is negative. And that's life. We just cannot help that. Some things are difficult. Some things that are difficult we'll never be able to accomplish. And that's just reality. That's not being negative. That's just being realistic. But sometimes things can be difficult or we see them as difficult, we perceive them as difficult, but it can be really easy. And if the first time it's difficult, we need to stop and look and maybe re-examine and make slight changes. Maybe it just takes one small change. Maybe it takes lots of changes. Maybe it takes one big change. Who knows? Everything's different. But the one thing I do know is that sometimes when you make these changes to difficult situations, they become easy. What things that we once saw as difficult become very easy. Not just easy, but joyful. But it's all about perspective, and it's all about trying, not avoiding, but just trying. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. If it remains difficult, it still remains difficult. And that's okay. But what if that difficult task becomes something easy and joyful? Not because the circumstances have changed, but because we've changed. Because we've examined the task before us, because we've examined what we're about to do, and we adjust ourselves. We either adjust our perspective or we adjust the way that we're going to try to do it, the way we're going to try and accomplish our end goal. That's the one of the two things. We're either going to adjust the way we see it, or we're going to adjust the way we accomplish. And what could be very difficult can become easy if we just do that. I learned that from my brother and his wife, Mary. And we shared so many conversations, so many laughs, so many wonderful moments, that even in the difficult moments, the joyful ones far outweighed it. And I just think if we take that practice into our own lives and into our daily lives, and if we change our perspective from seeing things so difficult and always seeing things in a negative way, because that's normal for a human being, that's our survival mode. We're always going to pick up on the negative things first, because then we're going to protect ourselves from those negative things. It's survival mode. You always look for the danger because you want to survive. It's just the way we're built. But we also have the power to change that, or to try and change it. You're not going to get it right every time. So don't put that kind of pressure on yourself. You're not going to get it right every time. But if we just slowly change the way we look at things and change the way we think of things, and we don't wait for the negative, and we don't see things as being difficult or as being negative, but we just look at it as a task. We look at it as something that's presented to us. And what are we going to do? How are we going to change to accomplish that goal, to accomplish that task? Wow, if we could just do that, I think so many things would be different in our lives, and so many things would change in the world. If we could see and acknowledge the difficulty, but also understand that we have the power to change the end result from that difficulty. And that goes for whatever, for any decision we make, for any goal that we have, for anything. If you want to talk to somebody, to talk to a stranger, if you want to join somebody for something, if you want to take that next step in your career, or take that next step in your relationship, take that next step doing something in your life. If we just adapt that way of thinking, acknowledging that, yes, this may be difficult. And if it is, how can I change my perspective? How can I change the way that I handle myself, or the way that I do this difficult thing, so that it's no longer difficult, but that it's easy and joyful? But we also need to prepare ourselves for the idea and the fact that it may tend to stay difficult. We may not get to accomplish that goal. And that's okay. That's okay too, because it's all part of life. So I want to thank you for joining us today. I want to thank you for letting me share this with you. And I hope I've said something that has made an impact on your life. I hope I've said something that may impact the way you think about things, or your perspective, or the way you see things. Most of all, I hope that I've said something that makes you feel seen, that makes you feel heard, and that lets you know that whatever you're struggling with, you do not have to suffer alone.